Hi, everyone. This is Alex Lindsay sitting in for Leo, who's on vacation this week. We're here with Jason Snell, Adam Engst, and, of course, Andy Ihnatko. And we're going to be talking about, of course, a little bit about Steve Jobs and where Apple is going to be without him, the iPhone 4S, and listener questions from people just like you, right here on MacBreak Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 268, recorded on October 11th, 2011. Sync on steroids. This episode of MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by GoToMeeting. Today's mobile world makes easy-to-use collaboration software more than nice to have. It's a necessity. For your free 30-day trial, go to GoToMeeting.com, promo code MacBreak. And by Carbonite Online Backup, automatic, continual, and unlimited backup for your computer files for only $59 a year. Try it at Carbonite.com and use the offer code MacBreak and get 2 bonus months with purchase. And by PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro. Go paperless and easily edit, correct, and sign PDFs with the affordable PDF Pen Pro toolkits from Smile Software. For a free demo, go to smilesoftware.com/MacBreak. Hey everyone, welcome back to MacBreak Weekly. This is Alex sitting in for Leo, who is on vacation this week. And we have an excellent crew as usual. Jason Snell from Macworld. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Alex.
Adam Engst from Tidbits. Hey, Adam.
Hello, Alex.
And, of course, Andy Ihnatko from the Chicago Sun-Times and the Celestial Waste of Bandwidth. Hey,
how you doing?
Hey. So before we get started here, one of the things I want to kind of set people up for is that we're experimenting with something for the show. And this experiment is already running full tilt. We started before the show started. And if you go to pixelcore.force.com/pixelcore. I know that's confusing, and I just couldn't fix the URL before the show. So pixelcore.force.com/pixelcore. You can log in here. You can create your own login. Anything that looks like an email is going to get you in. You just got to make a password. Use your own name if you can, because it helps us when we answer the question. And what you can do here is ask questions that we're going to use in the show, as well as vote them up or down. So you can vote. It's basically like Dig, except in real time for questions on the show. I just thought, we use this a lot in some of the PixelCore streams, and I thought I would use it on a larger platform, being here at MacBreak. So hopefully you guys will play along with us. And so far, a lot of people have, because there's already a lot of response. So we're definitely we'll start at the top soon. We're not going to jump to that one immediately. We've got a couple of things we're going to talk about, but then we're going to kind of be coming back to some of these questions throughout the show. So stay tuned for that. All right. So coming up, of course, the top piece of news is Steve Jobs, of course, passing last week between the last show. Now, we've talked about it a fair bit on the show. There was some Twit special pieces, and I'm sure that a lot of people have seen it, but I do think it's important for us to talk about it a little bit. One of the things that I think is really interesting is I think everyone seems to be talking about this. Why are we so sad about this? Because I know that I have been. For some reason, I've been listening to American Pie by Don McLean for for the last week, and just feeling really, it's just like this. It really does feel like the end of something, And I don't. It's kind of hard for me to put my finger on. Andy, why do so many people don't know him feel so sad with the passing of Steve?
I think that anything that ties so deeply into your childhood will have a really powerful mojo on you until the day you die, whether it's a style of car, whether it's a movie, a piece of music, even a computer. And when you have someone like Steve Jobs, who's in that very, very short list of geeks who, even back in the 80s, were famous geeks, people who you sort of imagine as absolutely not as a surrogate father, but at least as, well, here's what you could be like in 10 or 15 years. Yes, you're a nerdy, geeky kid who spends most of your time reading books and most of your time building things, as opposed to trying to get a spheroid or oblate spheroid across some sort of chalk mark on some sort of piece of real estate. That's good for you if you like that. But those of us who basically knew what the smell of solder, flux, and overcooked circuits were when at age 11 thought that, you know what, it would be really cool to be if we live to be 27 and have the sort of achievements that Steve Jobs has made. So when that sort of element is gone, it sort of reminds you, and this guy who in some way has represented you 10 years from now, he's gone now. And so now there's a certain lack of steering focus, even if it's a very, very tiny one. Again, I don't think anybody rational was patterning their lives against following Steve Jobs and trying to, what would Steve do in this situation? But nonetheless, of all the different things, the stars that you navigate by, now one of those is not there anymore. And that's a little bit, takes a bit of getting used to, I think. I
mean, Jason, didn't he seem like he was like the cool kid in school? Like, he was the kid that you were trying to follow. You always wanted to dress like him and be like him.
Yeah, I'm not sure I go for the he was a geek like us thing. I think he was cooler than that. But, I think this has a lot to do with the products that Steve Jobs helped bring into being with Apple are products that people feel an emotional attachment to. If it's the Mac, people made a choice to use the Mac and to be using a computer that wasn't the PC everybody was using. And more recently, people feel really attached to the iPod and iPhone and iPad. And he was seen as the person who ushered these products into the world. It was his company. We can argue about how much of that is him. There's a lot of myth making. It's not like he was soldering things in his garage and then bringing them out. But the fact is he was the guy who brought them to us, who introduced them, who got us excited about them. And I think that some aspect of this is it's selfishness in a good way. I think we all feel like the world's a poorer place and without Steve Jobs in it. And we're all a little worried about the fact that, he brought us all this great stuff and now he's gone. So what happens next? And I think that's all understandable. I think, anytime you see somebody who seems like they're so talented and they've created things that have had an impact on your life, even if you didn't know them personally, it's an absolutely natural reaction to look at their passing and say, boy, it's not going to be like it was ever again.
Well, and I think that even though he wasn't writing the code, even though he wasn't soldering the boards together, obviously, what he brought, that clear vision of what makes a difference and what doesn't make a difference and what needs to be removed, made just such a massive impact. Adam, what do you think? Where do you think the tech world would be without him? I mean, what would have happened? I know it's a big question, but I mean, would we still be using it feels like we would still be writing code.
Well, I do think there's a lot to that. And one of the things that we looked into with Tidbits in our special issue last night was just what would have happened if we hadn't had the Steve Jobs pushing the personal computer very early on, because you had a bunch of really kind of weird stuff. You had the Commodore, you had the TRS-80, stuff like that. It wasn't.
It's not like he created some of that too. I mean, Xerox had the idea of a graphical interface.
But he's the one who really turned it into something that people wanted, and that made it into a market. And you can't even eliminate the fact that that's in large part why IBM started the Skunk Works project to do the IBM PC. So if you take Steve Jobs out of the picture, I think you're talking a very, very different personal computer world, if in fact you even get one. And as the guy who wrote the article pointed out, Tim Berners-Lee, eventually invented the World Wide Web on a Next machine. So, there's a whole, it's one of those, parallel universe things that what if could be very, very strange without Steve Jobs.
There could be a very good short film there somewhere, the world without Steve Jobs. It's very...
Yeah, but sometimes I wish that Steve Jobs had never been born. It's like Steve Jobs, come back.
Yeah, it's a wonderful life without,
I was thinking more like those educational films where they say, what if we took away zinc oxide?
Now, Andy, how long do you think Apple can continue his trajectory, like in the same vein, or do you think they're going to start pivoting quickly? Is it going to be something that trajectory is just going to continue to go out for some period of time?
Well, I think everybody pretty much knows that the strategy has been mapped out for a few years in advance, at least. So it's not as though Apple's the least reactive company in the world. They just keep looking 4 or 5 years out. But I really hope that they are no longer following Steve Jobs' map or template 3 years from now, because remember that he himself was looking 4 or 5 years in the future, and now he has stopped looking into the future because he can't really see what's coming in his current state, unfortunately. So I would like to think that by having a set of a roadmap for how to think and how to plan and how to run the company, and also a roadmap for what the company is by its very nature, we'll start to see some shifts in the next couple of years when a new opportunity arrives for, be it a new manufacturing process or a new way of moving data from point A to point B, or even just a new basic shift of noticing that the people in Starbucks who used to be using an iPad and an iPhone next to them are now using an iPhone and a laptop next to them. What does that tell us about how people are using computers these days? And it's those things, from the large-scale stuff to the simple things of just noticing how people are holding a certain phone, that will really shape Apple's destiny and eventually have much more of an impact than any plans that Steve might have made.
Well, I mean, and Jason, how necessary is it for Apple to change the direction right now? I mean, the question is they've built a new industry, and it's now expanding very, very quickly. I mean, I think we just saw the news this week that 97% of all tablet traffic is the iPad. Is it something that for at least the next 2 or 3 years, they almost just have to not screw up? It's kind of like one of those things where your football team is winning by 24 points in the end of the third quarter. They just have to not throw any interceptions.
Right. Well, I think that there's an aspect to that, right, of running out the clock, of saying, how do we maximize the growth? How do we deal with the growth and expansion of our products that are ascendant? How do we deal with the products that are kind of coming down the other side? But if that's all you do, then you might win the game, but you'll lose. You won't even make the playoffs because to extend this metaphor way beyond its due. But yeah, I think the key for Apple is to use the Steve Jobs playbook in terms of how do we do what we do? How do we find new products? How do we make judgments? How does everybody here make decisions about what's next? What they need to not do is sort of slavishly say, well, Steve liked this thing, so let's do that because Steve liked it. Because to Andy's point, the fact is Steve's not around anymore. He's gone. He can't make those judgments. Steve Jobs wouldn't sit there and say, I pretty much believe what I believed 5 years ago, so let's just keep doing that. He would continue to adapt. So if they've done their jobs right, everybody's going to think, we're going to adapt like Steve. We're going to always question where things are going like Steve. And if they can do that, they're in much better shape. I mean, they've had, 8 years of knowing that their leader had a pretty serious form of cancer and has spent, especially the last 4 years, he's been very sick. Apple has gotten itself pretty well prepared for this period in its life, better than most companies, I think, do. Whether they'll succeed or not, I don't know. But for me, it's, you got to go with the playbook, and that means always questioning, always asking those questions and being really critical about products like Steve would do, not just say, what did Steve like when he was here?
Well, and we also see that. We see that culture in Pixar, where the questioning is really what makes a lot of what Pixar movies great, that everything is up for grabs. Everything is constantly being attacked. Mm-hmm. Everything is, it's a cult, this intense cauldron of creativity that's going on there. So hopefully we'll see that. Now Adam, Tim Cook is taking over. We saw a much different keynote than we've seen in the past, where he's not doing a lot of the stuff himself. He's handing that off. How else do you see Apple changing under his leadership?
Well, again, in the near term, not a whole lot, because Cook has really been in charge in a lot of ways for, frankly, quite a few years. I mean, as COO, he's been in charge of the day-to-day. And certainly as interim CEO, whenever Steve took a medical leave of absence, or when he actually stepped down, as a CEO in June, Cook has been able to, as far as we can tell, just continue along the same game. So I'm not seeing a whole lot changing. Honestly, I don't know Tim Cook very well. He's been one of those people sort of behind the scenes at Apple who has. They've just always gotten the job done quietly, and so I don't really know if he has a particular style that will become obvious over time that's radically different in terms of how the company will be run.
Do you think it's going to be a little less stressful working at Apple? I mean, I know there's a lot of stories about. There was a story in one of the things we were looking at about photographers, being used to being yelled at by Steve.
Definitely not. There's already one Tim Cook story, which is they were talking about a problem on the production line in China, and he had this guy there who was working on it that they were talking this about it. And then like 2 minutes later, they're continuing to talk, and Tim Cook looks at the guy and says, "Why are you still here? Go to China now." And the guy like didn't pack anything, drove to SFO, got on a plane, the next plane to China. He
No
had
luggage,
nothing. He had
no
not
nothing.
planned. So Tim Cook is an intense guy. He's a really operations focused guy. Hence the go to China and see what the heck is going on over there. But you know, he's an intense guy, and I know that all the reports say that he and Jobs, one of the things that they really connected, where Jobs interviewed him and was like, "This is the guy. This guy is great." He is intense he's got different skills and different interests, but he's got that. So I think Apple is going to be similarly managed in that way.
Yeah,
why are you still here?
Yeah. Yes. So and I think that it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, I think it seems like we won't really know until we see another large product launch. You know, like until we see something significant that isn't just a continuation. And it's hard to say, you know, what that next thing will be. I mean, I'm still holding out hope for, you know, for a TV. I want a whole TV. I don't want.
Come on, go all the way to a car. I mean, we want to see the Apple
you know, if
car.
Apple made a car, how many people here would buy an Apple made car? I'd buy a car. You know, it'd be electric and it'd be round, and you'd be able to use Siri in it, and you'd just be going, "Car, take me to San Francisco," and you know, and it would just drive you there. You know, again, so we're gonna jump in. So that's we're gonna jump into talking a little bit. We're gonna answer one of the questions that we have in our feedback loop. Again, if you guys are just tuning in, you can go to pixelcore.force.com/pixelcore. We'll put up a lower third here, and you can vote on the questions, and so you can decide which questions you want us to talk about next. We're gonna just kind of insert these throughout the show. This is kind of a bit of an experiment to see how well this goes. The first question here we had from Kevin Morgan, and he said, would love if you talked a little bit about how to share iCloud between husband and wife for reminders, etc. Jason, do you have any insights on how you can use iCloud for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, and I think this question actually suggests something about where iCloud is and where it's going. iCloud is not going to sync everything with everyone. I think when iCloud comes out of the gate, it's going to sync very specific things like documents. You know, I think the whole family aspect is really unclear. I think if you've got reminders and things like that.
It's never been clearer.
No,
Apple's never done this.
It really hasn't. And I think that Apple's grappling with it. I think that they will get to the point where there's stuff that's shared between different iTunes IDs. But right now, you know, if you want to share reminders, you know, I suppose you could have multiple phones with the same ID, but I think where Apple is really going is the concept that each individual human being has their own iCloud ID or Apple ID for the iCloud stuff, for their backup and things like that. And then you can have a separate ID for things like purchases, media purchases and app purchases. You can have two sort of IDs happening at the same time. So if they go down that route, then what Apple's going to say is your wife should probably have her own iCloud ID. And so in the short term, if you want to share reminders with your wife, I think there are third-party apps that are probably that sync and let you, like my wife and I use a thing called Cozy, which is where we do all our groceries. And, you know, she signed up for it and then signed me up as another person on the account, and it's free. And we just share our reminders and our grocery list that way. So iCloud, you know, a lot of this stuff is not going to be there. Apple's focusing on like Find My iPhone, some documents in the cloud stuff, iTunes in the cloud, and a backup for iOS devices. It's a really limited set, at least to start with. It's not a complete picture of like every bit of data that you have is suddenly going to sync. And they really don't know, to Adam's point, how they're going to deal with this concept of many people who want to share some things but not other things with other people. I'm hopeful that something like Find My Friends is a suggestion that maybe they've figured out that that's important, but it still doesn't resolve like one family has a single iTunes account for all of their app purchases.
Well, it seems like it seems like you almost want circles.
Well,
sharing of some sort, I think, has to show up eventually. Yeah,
but this is going to be typical Apple, where they're going to start small and then sort of expand the margins of the pond as they figure more things out. There's obviously some things I cannot talk about regarding iCloud's functionality, but I have been talking.
Show off.
No, it's just that there's a lot of vulgarity. It's mostly a porn distribution.
I see.
No, You get to this, you try to learn as much as you can, and you try to prepare for the stuff you have to write and the stuff you're going to be educating other people on. And the worst thing possible is when you reach the conclusion that a lot of this has not been figured out yet, and it will basically be deployed over time as Apple and other people observe how people are using the service and then figure out the best features to add and also the best ways to implement them. And that's the sort of conclusion that you draw, that you realize you've got to double check, triple check, and quadruple check, because the easier truth is that, no, Andy, you just don't get it. But yeah, I've been talking to the people behind some of the most popular Mac apps in the Mac App Store, and they've been telling me, no, well, we've been doing mock-ups of what we might do in the future if Apple chooses to implement it this way, and if iCloud goes in this other direction, we decided that we might want to do it like this. But yeah, if you ask anybody for, well, do you have a beta or an alpha you can share with me just so I can get a feel for how document sharing would happen between the desktop and a mobile device? It's like, here's a JPEG.
Well, and isn't the danger though? Isn't one of the dangers with Apple is that if you're a third-party developer and you develop something that works really well, you know that you got to make the money at some soon, because if it works really well and it integrates really well, there's a high probability Apple will just do it. You know, I mean, you were seeing that with the postcards.
Well,
there's a
we saw reminders, kind of, which is screenshots of which have been distributed freely online and pretty much well documented. The Reminders app kind of kneecaps a lot of the middle level people who are doing to-do list managers and appointment managers, because this is the sort of thing that integrates so well with iCloud and demonstrates a really well written iOS 5 app so well. But I think for iCloud, it's more like the game really doesn't start for another few months yet. A lot of us thought that when you flip the switch on iCloud, that's when you start to see a lot of things happening. It's really going to be, okay, now we finally have the infrastructure where we can start to test out ideas, whereas before all we had was a sketch pad, a whiteboard, and a whole room full of people who with big floating question marks over their heads.
Adam, do you think Apple already has a roadmap, or do you think they're it's just really wait and see?
It's really hard to tell. Joe Kissel's working on our Take Control of iCloud book, and he is tremendously frustrated right now because a whole lot of stuff simply doesn't work. And this is supposed to ship tomorrow. So, presumably there's going to be some changes since the last developer beta and whatnot, but he's like, I don't know how to document this because I can't get it to function. Yeah. And again, developers I've talked to have said basically the same thing, that whole chunks of it are still broken. So, there's a real question as to what's going to be on there on day one functioning. And I presume Apple has some ideas about where they want to go, but, I don't know, a lot of this stuff seems relatively obvious, and yet, Apple is not a company that ever telegraphs their moves. So, until we actually see something happen, we're really not going to have much of a clue.
All right. Well, we'll see how that goes. And once again, if you have any questions, go to pixelcore.force.com/pixelcore to ask your questions. And we are looking at the IRC, by the way, but it's just that it moves really, really fast. And so this kind of slows things down and allows us to kind of see what people are asking. So we are paying attention to that as well. And but before we go any further, we've got a lot more talking about the 4S, of course, which is shipping this week. But before we get to that, we'd like to thank one of our sponsors, GoToMeeting. Of course, GoToMeeting is something that I am very accustomed to at this point. I use it at least a couple times a week for PixelCore meetings, for meetings with other clients, and it's just such a great way to save a lot on jet fuel, reduce your carbon footprint, and make sure that you actually stay in touch with everyone. Of course, you can be sharing your screens, you can be talking to folks. It handles all of the voice over IP, so you don't have to sit there and everyone doesn't have to make phone calls. They can simply, and it sends reminders. It gets everyone set up. It's super easy to to manage that process. And now, one of the things to remember is that, of course, you think about it going from computer to computer, but one of the things, in addition to being able to add video, which you can see here on the screen right now, you can also use it with your Android and iPhone app. There's an Android and iPhone app, so you can actually be on your Android or iPhone or iPad and actually take part in these meetings. So you can be sitting in the cab, you can be sitting in the airport, you can easily just pull out whatever you need to be part of this process. And so it's just it's becoming easier and easier and easier to annotate stuff, to talk to people about stuff, to put all that stuff together. And so it is. GoToMeeting. It's one of those things that I was kind of resistant to for a little while. When we first started, I was like, oh, this isn't the same. But it really just, we use it so often now for so many different meetings that it's a really, really powerful way to stay in touch with everyone. And you can use it for product reviews, sales presentations, training sessions, just status reports. I mean, all of that stuff can be done. And you can do it with your desktop, or you can do it with your iPhone, iPad, or Android. So if you want a 30-day free trial, you can go to GoToMeeting.com. And you can go ahead and try it. It's just GoToMeeting.com. If you want that free 30 days, use the offer code MacBreak. It should be simple enough. And try it out for 30 days. Call your friends, call your co-workers, and collect a couple meetings together. I think you're really going to like it. It's very addicting. Once you start getting used to it, it's hard to give up. And I've tried. Because we have a lot of different clients, we've tried them all. We really tried all these different options, and GoToMeeting is definitely the way to go. So definitely check it out. So of course we have the the hard part with the iPhone 4S was that people saw the keynote, and they panned it. They said that this just, a lot of the pundits said that this is just not a very good update, and it probably wasn't going to, sell the way that we had seen iPhone sell in the past. And Andy, as the news came through, it looks like it was really just a complete failure. It was just just the iPhone 4S
Total
is just
flop.
not really. So no, of course they have sold 1 million the first day, 3 million over the weekend, I think is the projection, and it has I think that's pretty much as good as it gets for any product launch ever, Jason.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's up there, and the people who said that this was going to be disappointing, come on. First off, the iPhone 4, these are the people who say, oh, well, the iPhone 4, it's so old, it's been out for 16 months, there have been about a zillion Android phones released. The iPhone 4 was still the best-selling phone in existence. Month by month, it was the best-selling phone. It keeps selling, and now here comes the iPhone 4S. What a disaster. It looks the same on the outside and is faster, a lot faster on the inside, plus has a new camera that's better and this crazy voice technology. So it's the most popular phone in existence for the last 16 months with more stuff for the same price. What a nightmare.
Yeah,
Nobody
also
will want that.
it's weird when I keep having these conversations with people as though it's expected that you're going to buy a brand new phone every single year. And I'm the biggest nerd in almost any room, and I don't want to buy a new phone every year. I really like the features. Actually, the feature that I want the most from the iPhone 4S is just the camera. That is looks like one kick butt camera according to specs. But really, there's a reason why there's a 2-year contract. You have a phone, you use it for 2 years, you drop it, you break it, you put it through the wash, you feed it to the dog. At some point, you need a new phone, and that's when you buy a new one. But
that's why Apple does a 2-year cycle, right? It's because all the contracts are 2 years long anyway. So you do the major phone revision, and then a year later you add an S on the end and make it faster, and then you sell that, and then every 2 years you get a new one. The people who are upgrading to this phone, it's mostly going to be people with a 3GS or maybe a 3G. It's not the people who just bought an iPhone 4 6 months ago.
Yeah, it's not the suckers that bought the iPhone 4 like, oh, wait, that would be me.
It's a great phone.
I bought the iPhone 4 because I had a 3GS for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and it was the difference in the camera between the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 3 wasn't incremental; it was revolutionary. This is an incremental increase in camera quality, and not enough to get me to pay to go through all the rigmarole of taking my iPhone 4 back and pretending there aren't scratches in the side of it to sort of hopefully get that $200 credit that I can then apply on a brand new contract that'll put me 2 years in the future, and put the iPhone 5 with its 4G chip and its 8-inch display and its folding hover mode and all that sort of cool stuff, and the Retina projector. I want the iPhone 5. That's what I'm going to be spending the $200 for.
Adam, do you think that they just added just what they needed to get everyone to react? I mean, was it just a matter of just a perfect incremental upgrade?
Yeah, I think it was very, very well thought out. And the camera is indeed one of the big things that people rely on with their cell phones at this point. And making an 8-megapixel camera with all of the sort of under the hood improvements, I'm dying to see how well it works too. And the cycle I think makes sense. And people have people can actually play it. And what we've done is that my wife and I are a year set, so we always get the latest phone, one of us, and the other person, gets to stick with the previous model for another year. But it's not like we don't have it to see.
Well, and I think that what's interesting is because of some of the stuff that's tying all these pieces together, and we'll talk about a little bit of that later, but because it's tying together, I mean, that seems to be the culture. I know that's in my family, that's the culture where, basically I end up getting the newest one most of the time. I say it's my job, honey. It's I'm on a show. I have to know what these things are, and so I usually get them. And,
I don't
then
get that excuse.
and then the whole thing passes down. The whole thing. Someone ends up with the 4. I mean, I think my smallest kids will end up with my 4 because it turns out the 3GS does not work in the bathtub. Just in case you're wondering, it's just it doesn't recover well. So they tried it. My 4-year-old tried it, and that didn't work. But it does seem like that is that kind of trickle down phoneonomics that Apple has created seems to be kind of the common story you hear in companies and in families.
Well, plus you run into this trap where you're doing releases that are based mostly on style. It's really hard for me to routinely review Android phones because what am I going to say? It's a 4G phone with a 4-inch screen, and it runs Android 3.0, and it has a camera, and it also has a game on it that you can't remove. And that's really the review of almost every single Android phone that comes along. It's more important it's more important for Apple to say that we're going to put in something important every single year, every other year apparently. It's going to be super important, but we're not going to simply say, and now we decided to move the button 2 millimeters to make sure you'd have to buy a new case and a new charger.
Well, it's part of the secret to Apple's success, though, the fact that they've kind of latched on to the type of consumer. It's not just their product, but they've latched on to the type of consumer who just wants the next best thing and is willing to pay for that. And they seem to have cornered most of that market. Maybe not all of that market, but it seems like they've cornered this market of that type of person because it seems to affect the music sales, it seems to affect the app sales, it seems to affect the iPad and iPhone sales. That there's a certain personality of folks that want to stay on that front edge, and it seems that Jason, does it seem like Apple has really kind of taken over that part of the market?
I don't know if I'd say they've cornered the market as much as they've created that market, right? I mean, people love these products and are excited about them, and that excitement is what Apple capitalizes on. And yet, when they went to Verizon, there was obviously a lot of pent-up demand even then from people who couldn't or wouldn't switch to AT&T. We're going to see that with Sprint now, that there are going to be some other people who the carriers get to fight over these iPhone customers now, which is going to be interesting. Apple has cultivated a market, there's no doubt about it, but they've reached a lot of people who never really considered themselves Apple people, but they know what the iPhone is and they like it, and that's why Apple has been so wildly successful, is that they've gone beyond what we'd think of as the traditional kind of Apple user and make this whole new collection of people love their products.
Now, one of the things, the purchasing has not gone smoothly. I mean, it's gone, given that they sold 3 million, it's gone pretty well. But there a lot of people have been complaining. I actually did not order online because I couldn't figure out on the Apple.com site how to make sure that my text messaging was still part of my plan. so I went to AT&T. I signed up for AT&T. I don't want to mess with the other ones. And then I signed up for my minutes, and then I signed up for my unlimited data, which is still grandfathered in. Thank you, AT&T. But then when I got to the thing, it says no texting plan. In the actual last page before you hit order. And so now I'm kind of, for me, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to go to the Apple Store. I don't want to end up I don't want to start getting charged 20 cents a text message. That'll get really expensive for me, And so
I will.
Go ahead.
I will say that my experience with the AT&T tech support people, whenever I've had any kind of plan issues or whatnot, has absolutely been stellar. They certainly, the company takes flack for coverage and all that, but the actual people I've talked to, both in person at the stores and on the phone, whenever there's been a plan blip or whatever sort, has been really, really good. So, in that kind of a situation, well, they're not going to change it until you activate the phone. So, I just get the phone and then call them and
just tell them, hey, what's going on? Yeah, and I have to admit that every time I've had an interaction with AT&T, they have been, I will say that the customer service has been very good for me all over the world. So, because most of my AT&T questions are usually I'm international, and I'm I forgot to turn my international plan on, and you can actually call AT&T a week after you left and say you want to, and they'll backdate it. No, they probably don't want me to tell you.
And even they can even do things like if you haven't grandfathered in on the unlimited plan for iPhone and iPad, and let's say your credit card expires and you forget and it fails to auto renew or something like that, and you get tossed out of it, they will actually reactivate it for you exactly once. So if you call and say, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I guess I forgot to tell you guys that I've got this brand new card here," they will go through. They have to do a little bit of tap dancing to make it happen, but they'll make it very clear that we don't have to do this, and we can't do this a second time. But congratulations, wish granted. You will be seeing you will be seeing your unlimited Netflix streaming once again in 3 seconds.
Yeah, now, if a lot of people are deciding what phone they want to get, a lot of over 3 million have already decided, but what should they be considering when they're thinking about which service? Adam, is there a certain service that people should? Is there certain parts of the country? Is there certain things that they should be thinking about as far as whether they're getting Sprint, Verizon, or AT&T?
My experience is that that's one of those sort of local knowledge things where everyone knows, oh yeah, around here we all use Verizon. I live in upstate New York where, frankly, cell coverage in general sucks. And the word is generally, yeah, you use Verizon. Sprint, no, not so much. AT&T works when you're in downtown Ithaca, but you get further out, nothing. And once you get far enough out into upstate New York, nothing works at all. So, you just do what you can. And I suspect that a lot of places around are like that, where, you talk to the neighbors, you just get this sense of what works, what doesn't work. I also find it's actually helpful to talk to service people who go all over the place and what phone do they use at work?
Well, no, and I believe, and I don't have the Verizon phone, but the Verizon phone is still limited by the CDMA limits where you can't use data and talk on the phone at the same time, correct? I mean, that's
right. That's
I can't walk and chew gum either, so.
Right. Well, I mean, because that's something that for me, that I use that all the time. The other issue that I've had, so I got one of the Galaxy S2s, and one of the things that I noticed, I was in DC last week, and I'm constantly getting alerts that I'm going to be roaming in the U.S. on Sprint. I just thought I don't.
And you're roaming to Verizon data. You're roaming to Verizon data then.
Well, all I got to say is that was like a massive. Wake-up call for me, because on AT&T, you roam outside of the United States. You don't roam in the United States.
To be clear, you're talking about a Sprint phone, not Verizon.
I am talking about a Sprint phone.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm
sorry. I was a little confused.
Yeah. No, but it's
I travel and I often have 2 or 3 phones in my pockets because I'm testing almost all the time. And just consistently, the best coverage is always Verizon, not only just for being someplace and getting the minimum number of bars you need to get the job done, but also when you start to think about 4G networks. I always have now at least 2 4G phones with me. And although 4G coverage is still absolutely spotty, if I'm going to get a 4G signal anywhere, it's definitely going to be on a Verizon phone. So that's something to think about if you're thinking about the future.
As long as you don't have to talk and use the.
So, whenever the phone rings, I know that it's either 2 companies that always call, and one of which is always worth taking that phone call, or somebody who did not get the memo. But my entire outgoing message is, if you want to leave a voice, there's a reason why I didn't pick up, because I almost never answer the phone. If you want to leave a voicemail and you're okay with my responding in a week, maybe, or never, go ahead, but really you should text me or you should email me. So that's not an issue for me, and it might not be an issue for other people.
Right. Now, one of the things on Macworld.com, there's an opinion talking about the 3GS being the secret weapon. Jason, do you think that the 3GS, this free new iPhone, I mean, this has been one of the reasons that Android has done so well over the last little bit of time, is that there's a free version. And even though people aren't doing the math and realizing that they're spending $600 to $1,200 on the service, it turns out that not spending $50 or $100 on the phone makes sense to them. Jason, how big of a deal do you think that this free 3GS is going to be for the penetration of the iPhone?
I mean, it's easy for us nerds to poo-poo it and say, it's more than 2 years old. It's old news. Forget about the 3GS. And who needs a free phone? You can do the math, and all of that is true. But first off, there's a psychological thing. You are getting people in the door saying, oh, free iPhone, I'm going to check that out. And then maybe they say, well, I could get the 4 for $99. Maybe I'll do that. The other thing, in addition to just the psychology of marketing, is markets that Apple isn't as strong in traditionally. It's a free phone if it's something that is being offset by the carrier paying, where they're reimbursing Apple. But in some markets, prepay and no reimbursement is the model, and in some of the biggest developing markets, including China. So the cheaper you make that phone and make it available at as low a price as possible, that's going to give Apple inroads into all sorts of markets where they can't compete using the model they use in the U.S. and a lot of Europe, which is especially in the U.S. with these 2-year contracts. So I do think it's part of their portfolio. I think it's interesting in that Apple's decided not to make a cheap phone, but just have their cheap phone be an older phone that they continue to produce, and presumably their margins on it continue to increase so they can keep cutting the price. And in the end, yeah, I think it's really smart for them to say we start at free. If you go on Apple's website, it's starting at $0 and 0 cents, and then going up from there. It gives them all these price points from $0 all the way up to that 64 gig iPhone 4S, and that's good. That's good to get people in the door to consider an iPhone, and it's good for developing markets and markets where prepaid phones are more common.
Well, and I think the other thing is
there any?
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Is there any? Have you heard anything, Jason, about them actually offering the free iPhone 3GS in those developing markets? I mean, my understanding was that pricing is only here.
They've only really announced the pricing in the U.S. and in some other markets where this is going to happen. However, on the last, so almost 3 months now, quarterly conference call with analysts that they do when Apple releases its quarterly results, Tim Cook talked actually for quite a while about the importance of prepay, especially in the Chinese market, and trying to find a way to reach those people with a lower cost handset. And I can't look at that and this free in the U.S. 3GS and not connect the two. That is the strategy there, or it will be.
Because I think that one of the places where they've really had a lack in the U.S. market, in fact, is the lack of a prepaid phone here. That, you want to talk about that 2-year contract, adding up over time. And there's a lot of people who just say, the iPhone is too expensive because they can do the math. And, a reason why I don't use Verizon, but I wouldn't be in the slightest bit perturbed about having CDMA such that I could only, talk or browse the web at the same time because, I don't talk on the phone basically at all. I'd be more than happy to have a prepaid phone entirely because, I've got the smallest possible plan for our family plan, and we still have 5,000 rollover minutes. I think that talking on phones is really going away largely. And so,
just tell that to my 16-year-old daughter.
Well, but how much does she text versus talking?
She does a lot of texting, a lot of Facebook, but she also spends a lot of time on the phone. I always look at the minutes. I'm like, really? Yeah. That's the only reason we have the minutes plan that we have is my wife and my 16-year-old daughter.
Well, you can buy an unlocked 3GS for $375, which is not a great deal because there's so much that goes into the carrier subsidy. But you can. The thing for people like that who don't really want to call but want data, what I keep wondering is, will we see at some point an iPod Touch that has the same data plan as the iPad, where it's really just a cellular data device and you'll pay a $20 a month fee or something, and you won't do voice, and you'll have data caps. So if you want to do voice over IP, you can, but you're going to pay for the data. I wonder if that may be where we end up. But the price of these phones, it's not cheap to make an iPhone. So 3GS unsubsidized is still $375. It's not cheap.
That might even be a better fit for a prepaid plan because when you go to a mall kiosk or you go to a drugstore and you buy like a $30 or $20 burner phone, really all you're doing it for is connection to other people. But when you have an iPhone or a any kind of a smartphone, you really are invested in the apps that you buy for it and the data that you put on it. You really can't. You can pay month to month on it, and the real advantage of these plans is more that you can take a couple months off if you decide to, but you really have a lot more tied up in that phone than just your contract. So it's not just a case of making sure that they can make these phones available to everybody in every single buying situation, but also make sure that they've got a product that fits for that kind of consumer.
Well, and I also think for the 3GS, when you're looking at buying phones for your kids and your family, if you're going to buy them their phone, the advantage of the 3GS is not only that it is cheaper because the kids will more likely break it, but also that it is a lot more durable. Like I've seen what until my kids introduced the phone to the bath. They had thrown it, pushed it, turned it, all these other things, and it just kept. It was the little phone that just kept on ticking.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's really much more tough than the other ones. If you're looking at what you're going to get for your kids,
and it's still alive, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
this
that's
thing, you can drop this, it won't shatter.
Yeah. And so and the other thing to remember is that when we look at the cost of the of subscription, remember that that's a lot less when you do the family plan. I think it's like $15 a month incremental, and then you get more minutes or whatever, and so you keep on adding people up to it, and that starts to really add up. Where you might have a couple people with iPhone 4s, but then they get the kids all 3GSs or whatever, But I think that definitely kind of that may to some degree offset that. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Now, have you guys all ordered your phones, or no? You're not. Andy, you're not ordering your phone?
I'm gonna hold off because, again, it's like Jason said, I just bought this phone like 16 months ago, and I'd much rather make it an easy decision for a 2013 upgrade, a 2012 upgrade than a 2011 upgrade. So I'm gonna hold off for now.
Jason, are you?
Me too. Yeah, I got it. I got one. I'm probably eligible for the AT&T subsidy on Black Friday, which seems to be where they're pushing all the people who bought the iPhone right at the beginning, the iPhone 4. Mm-hmm. But my iPhone 4 is in pretty good shape. I actually had a warranty replacement a couple months ago, so it's basically a brand new iPhone 4, and it's in good shape. So for now, I'm going to stick with it. We'll probably have a 4S around the office to use, and maybe I'll use that from time to time. That might be nice. But as for the one that I own, that is for me, it's going to be the 4 for a while. For all the points Andy brings up, I mean, it's a new phone. I don't need a new phone again right now.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm going to try the Friday night, Saturday/Saturday thing. I don't think I can do the line, but I'm going to see what happens at the Apple Store. I'm not going to say which Apple Store I'm going to try to go to, but a lot of times it used to be that they'd sell out, and I'm taking the risk of them selling out. But a lot of times now, if you show up later in the day, past the line, you get a little bit a better situation. So anyways, we'll see how that goes. We're going to go into our feedback loop again. This is we have the votes. Another a voted question here in the pixelcore.force.com/pixelcore. This is the Apple TV update. This is from Paul Adams. He said, "Have any of you heard about updates coming soon to the Apple TV? I bought one yesterday." Oh, man. But then heard that the A5 Bluetooth update was coming soon. Andy, can you confirm this? Andy, tell us, how is the new Apple TV 3? Let us know.
Who's a good boy doesn't ask me questions about unreleased? Who's just such a girl?
Buster.
I love you, Buster. You never ask me questions about unreleased stuff.
So that's all I have. So, Jason, have you heard anything about this news?
Only the rumors. Everybody. It doesn't seem like it's imminent, or it would have happened, on Tuesday last week. So, I think it's something that Apple's looking at. I think, sure, an A5 Bluetooth snazzier Apple TV is inevitable. For me, though, it's not so much about that hardware; it's about the software. I want to see more services on the Apple TV, and I really want third-party plugins, third-party apps, basically, for the Apple TV. I think it's got a lot of potential. Last year, we were all talking about what if Apple put.
It's just an iOS. It's just the iOS.
It's iOS underneath it, right? So there could be an app store, and it could have games on it that you used your iPhone or iPod Touch or iPad as a controller.
And you don't need an upgrade for that. That could be iOS 5. I mean, it could just do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see that. I think that's more likely something that you hear about in the, in a developer conference, and then the developers get a few months to put it together. But one of the weaknesses of the Apple TV, when you look at something like the Roku players that are out there, is that they have a much broader selection of content and a third-party interface where you can write your own plugin if you're a provider. I have a Twit channel on my Roku box, right? Whereas Apple, if Major League Baseball wants to go in there, they got to work with Apple, and then there's an Apple software update that enables it, and then it's there for everybody. And that's kind of crazy. You want to be able to say, HBO, here's how you make HBO go on the Apple TV.
Well, you don't even have to say that. All you have to do is just open it up, so it basically has much of the same interface that you would see with. It is an iPhone just sitting inside of a little box, right?
Yeah, App Store for Apple TV. So I hope that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I think that would be more interesting. I would love to see them go Bluetooth or something. The first thing I get rid of with an app, I have two Apple TV 2s, and the first thing I get rid of is that stupid little controller. You know, the little.
And the great thing is the
they don't even
controller
bother to ship it.
removes itself for you.
Yeah, you just.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I thought I had a remote. I guess I didn't. Thank God they made something tiny and slippery that it's completely invisible inside a living room instead of something big and chunky that's easy to hold. That was good.
It floats around and I see it every once in a while. I'm like, oh right, this is that thing. Because I mean, you know, if anybody who's using an Apple TV, generally you almost everybody I think has an iPhone, and then you're controlling your Apple TV with your iPhone. And I actually just got a box. I'm still working on it, but that controls the rest of your TV and everything else with your iPhone too, because it's once you get used to that.
I still have these everywhere. The old ones.
Oh,
I turn literally within arm's reach at any point. I have one of these.
And no matter how hard how much time I spend trying to pair that with my Apple TV, my little silver one, if I have another computer, as soon as I go into it, I'm in like that. Whatever. I mean, it just takes over. Front row pops up immediately.
Lion will take care of that because Lion doesn't have front row anymore. So upgrade to Lion and you'll just kill front row entirely.
Thank goodness. Anyway, because I never use front row except to complain about it when it accidentally.
There's a place in the I think it's the security preference pane where you can turn off infrared on your Mac. Here's a tip. Go into the security preference pane, just turn it off, and then it'll never do it again, Alex.
Thank you. Why didn't I? Well, anyway, now I know. So I'll be able to go through it. So
I'm done.
It's kind of significant that Roku I think it was just today or yesterday, announced a new $49 version of the Roku box.
Yep.
So I think that this is them realizing that, okay, our device even looks like the new Apple TV, so we got to make sure that we keep selling to our strengths.
Do you think that the Apple TV is putting a lot of pressure on Roku?
I think no. I think absolutely. But now Roku, not only do they have an extra tool in the fact that you can buy 2 of ours for one of theirs, but also I think they're going to be caught up in the halo effect of Amazon's new online initiatives, where Amazon Instant Video was already a very good service, but over the past year, they've been doing nothing but striking more deals to get more content. And when the Kindle Fire gets released in a couple of weeks in November, that's only going to elevate the importance of that service. And now if someone is evaluating, trying to choose between, do I get a Roku or do I get an Apple TV, they're going to say, well, it will do everything the Apple TV does, only minus the access to the iTunes store and iTunes content, but plus access to all this Amazon content and independent channels.
Now, does it do screen saving? Does it do screen saving with your photos?
Because that's the main use of it.
No, I'm telling you, that is the main use for my wife.
I think there's like a Flickr channel and a Facebook channel, and there are lots of photo sharing channels. Yeah.
Okay, because that is like the number one thing.
Are you sometimes in your office and you see that big 60-inch display connected to your Apple TV with all the family photos, and suddenly a photo of your wife holding up a mascara written thing? You were supposed to meet me in the car 10 minutes ago for our dinner together, and she looks angry.
That's what PhotoStream.
I prefer not to talk about that.
That's why you give her the new iPhone, Andy.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll, that's another question from the. If you want to ask some questions or vote on them, we've got a lot of votes, a lot of stuff coming up here. So go ahead and keep on voting there. Oops, I'm moving it around while Eileen is trying to keep up with that. We've got more news here coming up soon, but before we do that, we're going to thank another one of our sponsors, Carbonite. Of course, if you haven't started backing your work up to the cloud, your most important documents, you really need to start thinking about that. It is extremely important. It's not truly backed up until you have it in. I always people ask me about backup, and it's got to be in 2 places and in the cloud. So we tend to put it on 2 Drobos and then in the cloud. But but either way, you got to get the most important documents, whether it's your family photos, your family documents. More and more of our stuff is no longer on paper. It is electronic, and that means that your one drive failure away. Many of us are one drive failure away from losing everything. Losing all those photos that we've been taking on our iPhone or our Canon or whatever it is. So it's very, very important. With Carbonite, of course, you can keep all that stuff safely away from computer crashes, viruses, fire, theft. All those things are stuff that you just it's a local problem. Your files are automatically and continually backed up. They're stored safely off-site. And if you have a computer disaster, of course, you can easily restore them. And plus, you can access your backed up files privately on any computer. So if you need them somewhere else, you can get that. So it's just such a great way to kind of back all of those files up for your computer. You can have unlimited backup for your PC or Mac for only $59 a year. All you got to do is go to Carbonite.com and use the offer code MacBreak, and you'll get 2 free months 2 extra free months, a bonus 3 months with that offer code. So MacBreak is the offer code. And so definitely check it out, Carbonite.com, and use the offer code MacBreak and start getting backed up today. All right, so I'm sorry here. So anyway, so we have Facebook for the iPad. So the Facebook has finally, there was conspiracy theory about why, about what it was about how long it was going to take, was going to be part of the Apple announcement, were they holding off for that? And then they just announced it. They just kind of like rolled it out. Jason, have you gotten a chance to take a look at it yet?
I have. I played with it last night.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's
Facebook.
It's Facebook. It's the Facebook app for the iPhone on the iPad. It's for the 5 people out there who've used the HP touchpad. It's the Facebook app for the HP touchpad. It's it's a little weird in that it has the chat so prominently, and I never use Facebook chat, and I'm always afraid I'm going to suddenly touch the wrong place and be chatting with somebody I vaguely knew in high school, which is kind of, I don't want to do that.
Creepy.
Yeah, I kind of don't want to do that, but it's it's fine. I realize that I don't go to Facebook very much because it's a website and I don't remember to open my browser and type in facebook.com. And I go to Twitter all the time because I have clients on my desktop and on my phone, and I just hit the app and I'm there looking. So that I think Facebook for iPad is a good fit. I'm much more likely to check Facebook on my iPad and I'm not a heavy Facebook user by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I'm more likely to use it now. And it looks like it's decent. It's a little weird, and they're going to have time to update it, but it's a start. It's fine. I liked some things and commented on some things, and I fortunately didn't chat with anybody. So
do you find that oftentimes I'm finding that the iPhone and iPad apps for a lot of these things, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, is actually much better than the web experience.
Yeah.
Sure, because it's a rich client, and that's what apps are great at, right? But
it's actually also a simpler client. I mean,
yes.
the Facebook web app is so horrible, and it changes every 30 seconds, as far as I can tell. So every time I learn how to do one thing in Facebook, keep in mind I visit Facebook only about once a month if I can possibly keep it at that level. But it's an inscrutable, horrible, nasty website, and so the apps are just a lot easier.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I would disagree with the Twitter app, because I think the Twitter app is just someone who tried LDS a little once too many times. I've been using it for a year and a half. I still think it doesn't work. I still think it's stupid and cluttered and clumsy. I think it breaks so many basic rules and doesn't do it in a productive way. And I still use actually use the web client for Twitter whenever I use Twitter, as opposed to any application that's put on at least the iPad. On the iPhone, it's okay, but on the iPad, it's an abomination. But we're absolutely right with Facebook. You need a front end app to actually make that interface work.
Well, I think that using Twitterific for the iPad, and I think it's great. So, but you're right, the Twitter app for the iPad is bizarre. But Twitterific for me, is best actually on the iPad, and without it, I would really not use Twitter. I think.
I agree with Jason. Same thing. Twitterific.
Yeah, so that is, and then I guess some people are saying in the IRC TweetDeck, but yeah, what's interesting is that a lot of the apps, and I just goes back to, and this has always been my argument, is that the web is, in a lot of ways, I think there's a challenge for the web, is that all these little apps, I'd much rather go to a lot of these things. I don't want to go to NPR.com. I just want to open up the NPR app. I don't want to use Facebook.com. I just want to open up my Facebook app. And the question is does that start to water down the web? As we start to kind of siphon off.
Well, I think one of the very original conceptions of the web was that it would be as much a transport medium between clients with custom interfaces as this sort of generic browser that everything would have to try to fit into. That if you go back to some of the early stuff written, by the people who were creating it, that was their intent. And so, I've always been very interested to see just how impressive some website interfaces can be, when others you just cringe because it's so much better done with a custom interface, and the apps really make that even better than frankly than the Mac. That there's a lot of apps. WeatherBug, I'm a big weather fan, and so I use WeatherBug on the iPhone or the iPad, and never ever visit a website or even use frankly an app on the Mac. It's just a better interface.
I think I'm more of a fan of these websites finding a way to project their services in a more context-aware manner. I've just been playing with the new Mango phones, Microsoft's new version of Windows Phone 7, and they're sort of carrying over something that they were demonstrating in Windows 8 a few weeks ago, which is that you will have a Twitter app, or you will have a phone app, or a photo app, or a Facebook app, but not only will it be an app just for Facebook, but whenever you're in any other app that deals with pictures or deals with contacts and moving things from one place to another and publishing things, it won't launch the Facebook app, but that part of the Facebook app that can take a picture and post it to your Facebook profile will simply make itself aware that, hey, he's doing something involving a photo. If he asks for different things that can be done with this photo, I should be there to say, oh, by the way, I'm a Facebook app and I can help you post this thing right now. I really think that's a level of sophistication that's missing from most of these independent iOS apps.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they continue to progress. I just find myself spending less and less time on the web and more time spent on my internet apps that sit on my iPad.
Can you imagine that this was going to be one of the big rumors about, hey, we got a scoop, there might be a Facebook app for the iPad announced at Apple. Like, okay, dude, it's a Facebook app. I've got 4 of them. Who cares?
So now another question from our listening audience. The top vote getter now is iCloud versus Google. They want to hear the comparison. So
iCloud.
It doesn't seem like there's a comparison.
Versus Muhammad Ali.
This is from Jake. Go ahead.
It's not really the same thing.
It's just right now. Well, I mean that's the whole thing. It's two completely different worlds right now, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, iCloud, first of all, as we were saying before, not done, not going to be very impressive at the start, but hopefully it's a good foundation for Apple to do some of this stuff right. That said, iCloud is really basically a fancy virtual cable. It's going to let you sync between endpoints of apps on devices you own. That's what it's for.
Now, but here's the question: is that as you look at the app support that's coming, and as you look at the APIs that are going to be available, do you get into a situation where you do start to be able to collaborate? Like, for instance, do you see someday when we're able to collaborate, where 2 people can be inside of Keynote, collaborating on a presentation, using that type of stuff?
We can fantasize about that, but Apple has said nothing about it.
It works in my head. Works really well.
It does work in your head. But this is Apple. This is the company that's come out with iWork.com. I mean, Apple sucks at collaboration. They really don't understand it. They don't do it well, and they never have. And so if you look at iCloud, from developers I've talked to, there are no APIs surrounding collaboration, surrounding real-time stuff, any of that kind of thing right now. And maybe they'll have it. I certainly hope they do. Don't get me wrong. I want to see iCloud is just, don't do it now.
Really, iCloud is just sync on steroids.
Sync on steroids, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's sync on steroids. Whereas Google is doing a heck of a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm a Gmail user. I'm a Google Plus user. They do a lot of interesting things.
Jason?
I think the only place where I'm going to draw a parallel here, I'm going to interpret this question in a certain way. What iCloud and Google have in common is this, which is it's about smartphone setup and operation. I think one of the biggest advantages Android has had over the iOS has been the fact that when you take an Android phone out of the box, you basically tap through it, you put in your Google ID or sign up for a Google ID if you don't have one, and then your phone has access to all of these different services. It's online. You never had to connect it to your computer. It's just on, and all of your data is syncing, and you're connected to email and all of that. And Apple hasn't done that. You had to connect it to iTunes, and you had to have an Apple ID and all of these things. And now with iCloud and with iOS 5, you get that phone out of the box, you put in your Apple ID or sign up for an iCloud ID. It'll back up, so you never have to attach it to a computer. It'll give you email. It'll give you the Find My Phone feature, a bunch of other stuff. And from here on out, Apple can assume that every single person who has this phone has access to those services or can get it for free in a way that MobileMe, which was $99 a year, they could never assume that MobileMe was there. So in that way, it is huge for Apple because it allows Apple to assume some online connectivity and syncing that Google could always assume, but that Apple couldn't. So in that way, they're similar. But beyond that, Adam is absolutely right. It is not Google Docs. It is not Dropbox. It may become those things eventually, maybe, but it's a long way from there.
Andy?
Yeah, they're just fundamentally different services. But I think that one of the most important features of iCloud is that it's being presented as a ubiquitous feature. Google's biggest weakness is that they tend to sort of hold up the new, hey, look, here's the new thing. It's beautiful, and it's going to be the future of everything, and we're doing things exactly the way that the people aren't doing it, and it's being great. And then they simply put it out to the pasture, close the door, and forget that it exists. So it either forages and survives, or it starves to death out there. People have to be reminded that, okay, Google has a music store, Google has a video store, Google has a bookstore. Nobody ever uses these things because they don't promote them. They don't give you any sort of a reason why you should use this instead of the Kindle store or the iTunes store or Amazon Instant Video. So that's sort of a tactical advantage of iCloud. Just the simple idea that Apple is saying that this is a product that's on the same level as the iPhone, as the iPad, as anything else that we do. That means that this infrastructure is going to be in place for the next generation of apps that choose to support it. Now, tomorrow, it's not good. The world will not have changed. Among the list of surprises related to iCloud is that Apple apparently is not going to be releasing a new version of the desktop iWork suite that supports iCloud. So that's going to have to come into the future. But a year from now, things could be pretty interesting. It really comes down to, do you define most of your computing as me and the data that I do across several devices, or do you define your computing as me and the several other people that I work with that have to share a certain amount, not sharing amongst lots of devices, but sharing amongst lots of people? The Google approach is definitely good for sharing things across lots of people. I think that the iCloud approach is going to be superior for people who have to share things across multiple devices.
Well, I know that I have iPads and computers and everything else, and I find I'm dying for the iCloud. I'm dying for that to start syncing all that stuff up. I take, just like taking a photo with my iPhone, I'm like, okay, now like if I want to get it onto my computer for some reason, I'm just like, ugh, okay, well.
If there was one thing that Apple clearly was designing iCloud for, it was the idea that you've got your stuff, and your stuff is always accessible to you. And if you're on your Mac or an iPad or an iPhone or whatever, your stuff is there, or it seems like it's there because it's everywhere. And that could be photos, and that could be your documents. It's not going to be all there on day one, but that is what their approach really is all about, is you never have to find your stuff or sync your stuff or copy it from one place or another. It's just there magically, really. I hate to say magically, but it's like that. It's like, oh, it's always wherever I look for it, it's there. That's what they want iCloud to be.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. It's going to be very disruptive too. This is another hour-long topic. I'm sorry, I'll cut myself off soon, but it's because Jason is the lovely man who put me on to Scrivener a couple years ago, and after I downloaded the demo, after about 4 hours, I switched 10 years worth of how I do things from Word and BB Edit to Scrivener because I love that desktop app so much. But Dropbox and the iPad basically have forced me to switch from Scrivener for everything to Scrivener and Pages, because the ability to start a document in Pages on my desktop and then simply pick up exactly where I left off on my iPad at a bakery or at a coffee shop or wherever, and also be editing on my iPhone without having to do any exports or imports or worry about compatibility. That's such a huge feature, and it breaks my heart. And I still use Scrivener for all my big, like, book-length projects. But it just shows me that that's going to be an issue in 2012 when iCloud is up and spinning. And I'm looking at Scrivener, which I don't know if this can be supporting iCloud in the future, but it's going to be between apps that don't support that kind of holistic approach to your data everywhere, no matter what device you have, and the apps that don't support iCloud and don't have an iOS equivalent. That's going to be so disruptive.
Yeah, well, and fortunately, that information, those APIs should be available to those developers. So it's just a matter of them deciding that they're going to integrate those.
Well, you got to build an iOS app too, though. That's the trick. Is that if you're Scrivener, you don't have an iPad app, so
no pressure.
They're going to have to build one or make a deal with somebody who's got something, and that. So it's not just supporting the API; it's being on all the platforms and then being able to sync between them, and it's going to be a lot of work. Some developers are really going to have a problem with that.
Yeah. Another question from our listening audience. This is from Stephen Bond. Any guess as to if Siri will come to the iPad 2? And I guess I would extend that question to is it going to be available on desktops? Is it going to be available? Do we think that Siri is going to be something that we see system wide, Andy?
I think that it's going to come to those other devices eventually, but I think that Apple explicitly feels as though Siri is a better solution for when you're operating a device that's this size and you're operating it like this. Because when you're operating a device at this size, you can't really type things in. And also, you're going to be walking, you might even be driving. You're not in situations where it's safe or practical to have access to this thing. So that's why the ability to say, to simply say, Siri, how many movies was Don Knotts in? And get back the answer, Don Knotts was in 17 movies, and keep on walking is going to be more important. So when you get into a situation where you're in front of a big 101 keyboard and you got a trackpad, you got a mouse, you got all these other sort of things, that's why I think Apple is going to think that, well, of course, we own this technology. It's cool. It's a signature feature that we're very proud of. We'll move it to the desktop and we'll move it to the iPad eventually, but that's really by no means a priority.
Another question really quickly. I'll send this one over to Jason. We're just going to kind of go around the horn really quickly. AirPlay to Macs. This is from Jeff Perface, I believe. He said, am I missing something in this discussion to iOS? Is there no way to have an AirPlay to a Mac Mini that's attached to an HD TV? So instead of going to your Apple TV, is there a way to do that? Jason, is there a way to do that with your Mac Mini, or is that just something that Apple's left out?
Wow, I do not know of one. I think they really want you to put an Apple TV attached to that TV. I think so. It's a good point. You'd think that Apple would tighten the screws on a lot of this stuff. To Andy's point, they may throw Siri and other devices, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, just to say, well, it's everywhere, and that's important. But I think not. I think that AirPlay out onto a Mac is something Apple's just sort of stepping away from that. They've got a device for TVs, and it's not the Mac.
Yeah, pushing the Mac forward is not really. I mean, continuing
but you
its
could run
trajectory.
Airfoil.
Go ahead.
But you could run Airfoil. Rogue Amoeba's Airfoil, which allows you to, with Airfoil speakers, to get AirPlay on the Mac.
To get for audio, right? It does it do
for audio? Yeah. Oh, sorry, video. I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So the
I'm doing furious searches right now because I could have sworn that I saw an app at some point.
While he's doing that, I'm going to answer one more question before we start going into our tips and tricks. We already talked about the Apple TV, Siri on the Mac, and I'm just going to answer one here that is. Someone's asking about my Galaxy 2 versus iPhone 4 because I now have a Galaxy 2S and an iPhone 4, and this is from Slava Rozov, and so I have to say, I mean, there's a lot of geeky things that I like about the 2S. I think that the 2S is a lot of fun. I do find it to be a little bit overwhelming about all the different options that I can do and all the little things, and I still can't, like when it started going off, finding a way to silence it quickly was not as simple as an iPhone, or finding, like, I somehow got it into airport mode and then figuring out where I go back to take it out of airport mode. There's lots of little things that are just, with an iPhone, I feel like are really, really straightforward, and with my with the Android, I don't feel like it's nearly as straightforward. I don't think it's just because I've been using an iPhone for a long time. I just think that there's just a lot of different places to go. There's one set of screens, and then there's another set of screens for the apps, and there's another set of screens for other things, and I'm fine with it. I'm definitely enjoying it. So it's not like I'm complaining about it. I think that it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it in for an iPhone 4, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it to people who are not technically savvy. so that I think it's a much heavier from a user perspective. It does require a little bit more technical knowledge than my iPhone 4. So anyway, so that's my my little thing. And the last question, because there was one right above my question, iOS upgrade. Will there be any issues from going from the GM to the general release version? Will I have to do anything like start with a blank iPad? Andy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, right. You had access to iOS 5 for months before anybody else, and now you're looking for people to help you make, pity me. I have to transition from having this wonderful operating system 3 months. You know what? You make me sick. You just take.
Only Apple knows for sure anyway whether
I don't know
whether the GM will be real or not. I do have an answer for Jeff, by the way. There's at least Erica from the unofficial Apple weblog hacked together something called AirPlayer that's supposed to do AirPlay video on the Mac. It pretends to be an Apple TV. Worth a try. I haven't tried it. It looks like it's very, very beta, kind of hacked together, like I said. But who knows? It might work. Worth a shot. Just Google AirPlayer and see what comes up.
So now we are going to, about to go into our tips and tricks, and but before we dive into that, and by the way, I want to thank everyone. Before we go into that, I want to thank everybody for playing our little Q&A game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was really a lot of fun for me to see you guys so actively.
Squirm.
Well, no, to see all the listeners really participating with great questions and the voting and all the other stuff. I wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen. I was afraid that we might have like 3 questions, and we had obviously so many questions that we can only get to a small percentage of them. But we were able to figure out which ones by the voting and everything else. And so hopefully let us know whether you want us to do that again. And as a reminder, we also have an email. You can actually let us know via email, or you can send questions in via email at MacBreak at twit.tv. So let us know what you thought of the Q&A at MacBreak at twit.tv, as well as any questions that you may have or any comments about the show. So definitely try that out. Also, we of course want to thank our another sponsor. We'd like to thank Smile Software, and specifically Smile Software, of course, makes a lot of great software. And one of my favorites, one of my growing favorites, is PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro. I'm using PDF Pen Pro a fair bit now, and basically one of the problems you get into, you get people who send you an email and they have a PDF and you have to mark it up, and you just try. It used to be I'd try to open that in Photoshop and I'd draw on it, and then I'd save it out as a JPEG and I'd send it back to them. Or you have to sign things, or you have to put. And yesterday I was talking to one of our clients about where to put cameras, in this room, and they said, "Oh, just put a couple X's," and they sent me a PDF, and I'm like, "Well, how do I do this?" So I'm like, and I opened up PDF Pro. And just with my mouse, or with my trackpad, I just sat there and just drew little X's in that, it just popped up immediately. There wasn't a lot to think about, just drew some X's, and then just immediately sent it back. And it is just so fluid. If you're signing things, if you're updating things, if you need to, it's just a great way for you to mark up a PDF and get it back out there. Now, you can do some of this if you have Acrobat Pro or whatever, but this, being able to do it so easily for something that's a lot less expensive, and to be honest with you, more fluid and more powerful in many ways, it's just really the way to go. So if you get PDFs mailed to you, instead of printing them out, signing them, faxing them back, if you want to update them, these are all things that you can do with PDF Pen and PDF Pen and PDF. You can edit them. You can, of course, you can go paperless with OCR. You can make your business processes just a lot easier. Your PDFs are just, it's so much easier to work quickly through the process and update them. So you can even add, of course, you can add text, images, and signatures, and so you don't need to, it's not just simply marking pieces up. The big thing that I use it for is corrections. So circling things, making comments on things, deciding on, giving people input is the #1 reason that I use PDF Pen. Now, PDF Pen lets you do all of those things. PDF Pen Pro lets you create interactive forms. That's something that's built into the PDF format, is to be able to do interactive forms. Most people don't use it because they have something very basic and they don't have the ability to build that easily. And PDF Pen Pro will let you do that. You can also convert websites to multi-page PDFs, including the hyperlinks. So all of that stuff can also be done. Now, if you're interested in checking this out, you can go and get a free demo of PDF Pen at smilesoftware.com/MacBreak. So you can go there, and PDF Pen is $59.95, and PDF Pen Pro is $99.95. If you're just doing updates, if you're just marking stuff up, you can probably get away with PDF Pen. If you are interested in the interactive forms and converting websites to multi-page PDFs, go with Pen Pro. And again, it's smilesoftware.com/MacBreak. And if you have to do this as often as I do, it's worth every penny. So anyway, so check it out. Once again, smilesoftware.com/MacBreak. Andy, do you have a Mac OS tip for us?
Just a quick one that I picked because this sort of really helped me get through my inbox this morning. That they've added now quick look previews to every link that comes to you basically everywhere. So if you go into so especially if you're inside mail and someone sends you, by the way, I've got a new product. It's really cool. Here's a site where you can take a look at what it's going at. Believe it or not, it actually is faster for me to just take the second and a half to keep my brain in the mail game. And if there's a simple selector pop up there that will let you quick look that website, that URL right within mail. It'll just be a little bit of a pop-up, just like every other quick look. And it seems to work for pretty much every single type of link that you can possibly get to. So quick way to, if it's not worth committing the tab over to Safari, or as I often do, I use I've got like 40 or 50 right now. There's we promised a whole bunch of science fiction analogies here, so we skipped the past 35 minutes. So I'm going to use the analogy of The Thing, where you have this horrible monster that's frozen, and so long as it stays frozen, it won't wreak destruction. As I speak on my MacBook Pro, that I do all of my work on, that's the status of Safari. Because it's got like 40 windows, each with like 10 different tabs in it. That's just choking everything to death. Unfortunately, a lot of those tabs have information that I need to copy over, so I can quickly quit it. But every time, if I ever relaunch that Safari, it's going to quickly try to relaunch 200 tabs. So if I click on that link inside the mail, it will launch Safari and bring my entire Mac to a deathly death of death. So being able,
that's really a problem for me, the deathly death of death.
Especially if it's particularly deathly, yes. And mine is particularly deathly.
Yes.
There's the Well of Souls effect every time that I even hover near the Safari icon at this point. So this is a way to be able to take a look at URLs without actually having to risk launching Safari, which sometimes is a bad thing.
Very good. So I think it's my little tip for the iOS is creating capitals. So I don't know how many times you have to create, you want to do HD or you want to capitalize something. And, I know it seems simple that you click on the shift and then you click on the H and everything else or whatever. But there's actually a faster way to do that. And that is if you're moving really quickly and you don't want to, just go into that mode, you can actually just click on the shift for a second and drag over to the letter that you want, and you can simply be dragging over, and it's a single, you're getting the shift, but you're simply click on the shift and drag over to the letter, and you get that capital very quickly. And it's something that I know it seems simple, but otherwise, a lot of times I find myself, it's just a constant extra. Shift this, shift this, shift this, shift this, and the drag is I find to be a lot faster. So anyway, that's a little one that someone showed me at the airport. It was not. I didn't come up with it. I should have kept their name, but we were talking about what happens now is that if you see me in the airport and I see we start talking about iPhones, because Apple users are still, even though there's so many more of us now, we still have that kind of. This thing that if someone else is using an Apple product, you feel like you can just walk up and sit next to them and start talking to them, or at least people feel like that with me. And so they, so you start trading notes. And one of my first things is, so what are the cool tricks that you can do with your iPhone? Because I know that I have to come up with something for the show. So anyway, that's the one. I thought it was cool, and it's definitely sped things up. We have an email. Again, you can go to MacBreak at twit.tv, and this is from Valerie. She said, I love getting all sorts of notifications on my iPad, Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, but when I go back to my Mac, I can't seem to find any similar options. I've tried Growl, but the programs have to be open for the notifications to work. Is there any way to solve that? Is there any way to get some of these notifications, going? I don't think that there is. I think that this is
no.
I think all we can say. I think, she said, "Help me, MacBreak crew." I don't know if we're going to be able to help you. I don't have a rope.
Isn't there a push notification system now in Lion that nobody's taking advantage of?
Oh, there might be. Maybe
I don't know. It may come. It would not surprise me if eventually apps get updated to do this. But Growl, actually, some stuff like Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook, if you can set those services up to email you when things happen, you can use a service. What is it? You can use Boxcar to send notifications, and they go to your phone. I'm just trying to think. There's got to be a way to send it to your Mac too, using Growl or something. And I don't know if there's multiple.
Growl is actually sort of the same thing, because the trick is that although the apps do have to be running, the whole point of Lion and where Apple's going more is that you shouldn't have to worry about whether things are running or not. And so if you can just have things running most of the time, then Growl will be the answer. Personally, I've always launched all my standard apps at startup, because then I don't have to wait for them later. And so you just have this constant set available. So it's not, Growl is it, but maybe it's just a change in working behavior that might get it to work for you.
It would be nice if Growl could do something like check a mailbox or some service somewhere and get some warnings that things are happening now, because then you could use like Google Mail filters and stuff. But yeah, I think keeping a phone around for push notifications may be a better option right now. But Apple is moving on this, so it may happen in the next year or so.
All right, and now we are ready for our tips of the week. Sorry, Valerie, we weren't more useful for you. Andy, do you have a tip for us? All right, not a tip, but a pick of the week.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
I'm sorry.
Tips, another tip. Yeah.
I can only think of one useful thing at a time, and that was the one thing that was useful. My favorite new things on the App Store hit about a month ago. It's a really cool system-wide utility called Yoink. Yoink for non-Simpsons fans. It's really, really cool. If you ever had the problem where you need to drag files from one place to another, but sometimes you have to sort of hold this thing under the mouse pointer while you go to a mystical and magical land known as another space, or you're not really sure where you need to drill deep down into the file structure to get to the target point and you kind of lose it or drop it at some point along the way, or you know that you have to move, you're trying to collect together. I got 4 or 5 or 6 files and they're kind of in different parts of the hard drive, but you need to open them all in Photoshop or put them all in this other place. Yoink will help you out in this regard. Every time that you're in the Finder and you drag a file, what happens is, I've actually got it here on the iPad, and you drag a file, this cool little shelf pops up. And that only pops up when you're dragging something in. That's like a temporary shelf to hold files that you want to drag someplace else. And so long as that shelf is empty, it's completely invisible. But when you have stuff inside the shelf, and they're all files, it will remain there while there's still content in there. So now you can just simply navigate to wherever you need to go, be it a new Finder window, a new folder, switch over to a different space, or tab over to Photoshop, or tab over to your word processor where you need to drag these image files in, and then simply drag them right from the shelf and directly into your app. So it's such a simple and natural and completely inobtrusive way to handle these really which sometimes is a needlessly complicated operation. And I love it because not only is it just $2.99, not only does it work really well, not only does it work inobtrusively, but there are so many different ways that you can actually use it. I did buy it for I am the sort of person who tends to just drop files wherever they happen to land, and then I have to organize them later on. That's really why I bought it for, so I can just simply say this file, and this file. Okay, put that into the PDFs folder. But it seemed with this shelf available to me wherever I go, I keep using it time and time and time again. I wish it worked for random clippings. It only works for files, but it would be great if I could just have an image, just a selection of text or a selection of numbers, and just keep it there because I know I'm going to need it in a couple of different places, or a markup template that I'm going to need someplace else. But I think that they're doing the right thing by simply keeping the focus on one task and do it exceptionally well. So Yoink, love it, and it went for. I think the vote of confidence on any app that you buy through the App Store is how long does it take for it to go from only installed on the Mac that you were in front of when you purchased it to the first time you sit in front of your MacBook and then your iMac, you notice, oh wait, I can't do that cool thing I can do in that first one, and then you click on the update to install it on the others. And this one spread throughout my entire network in about an hour. It was so useful.
That's great. Yoink.
It's the next shelf. It's just like NextOS.
Adam, your pick for the week.
My pick for the week is the group of photo sharing website Zangzing, which is a whole lot of fun to say, and as far as I can tell, utterly random as far as the name goes. But the basic problem is you're in a club, you have a team, you have a group of friends that you all are at an event, and you all take pictures. How do you share them? And so what Zangzing does is allows you to create an album that everyone can upload to, and then everyone can see. And there's privacy controls, so albums can be private, or they can be hidden, or they can be entirely public. And it's a very simple site. What's astonishing to me, honestly, I mean, can't quite tell this from the video, but it's entirely HTML5, no Flash, and yeah, this is one of the most stunning web apps I've ever seen in terms of what they can do. So it's zangzing.com, and a free site right now. They'll probably have some kind of premium upgrade for people who want unlimited amounts of storage, and they'll also be able to buy prints as the business model. But basic accounts are free, and it's definitely worth a look. Some of the people who did it actually were behind Claris Organizer way back when, and then moved on to the Newton team. So there's a Mac heritage behind it as well.
This is great. I mean, I've often thought about like what would be the best way to be at a wedding or a birthday party or a football game or whatever, and just have everything kind of all put it. Now, does it go somewhere where you can, and then you can get a hold of that album quickly and easily?
Yeah. Yeah, if you go to zangzing.com/Adam Engst, for instance, you can see some of the public albums I've done. But basically, one place I'm using it, which is a non-public way, in fact, is with the Ithaca cross-country teams, because all these people have kids who are running. The parents go, they take tons of pictures, but they don't necessarily get pictures of their all the kids, and so merge them all together, and there's a pretty good chance of it. Mm-hmm. And so, for every meet, we're getting hundreds and hundreds of pictures now, and, everyone just adores it. So you click on one of those, and if you click the play button, you get a screen, you get a slideshow. And again, all in HTML.
And that's
font,
all updating.
All in the
that's
browser.
all updating in real time. So you could theoretically have that projected on the wall and have it be, you could be at a party with the pictures from the party. Constantly updating to the screen.
Absolutely. You can even email photos into it. So if you've got a photo on your phone and you just want to, get it up there really quickly, you can just send it via email. Mm-hmm. Very impressive site. And what I like about it is that it's really designed for groups. A lot of the websites, Flickr and SmugMug and whatnot, you can kind of do it, but it's not really designed for that problem, so someone ends up having to collect the photos and upload them and manage them. And, as we all know, the more managing of photos you have to do, the less likely you are to share them with anybody.
Right. So it's Zangzing.
Yes.
Sounds
I
like
don't know
Chinese leader.
See, we're running out of words for things related to technology. That's we got to call something. We got to call it yoink, or we got to call it Zangzing, or.
Exactly.
Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody zang
tonight. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jason,
there's another website.
Jason, do you have a pick? Do you have another crazy name for us?
I don't. My pick, you will be able to figure out what it is from the name, which is always good. It's a $3 app. It's brand new from App Cubby. It's called Tweet Speaker, and it does what it says on the tin. And this is something Siri doesn't do. Siri will not read your tweets to you, but Tweet Speaker will. You can actually go back in your timeline on Twitter or to a list or however you want to do it and press play. And you know what it does? It starts to read your Twitter stream out loud to you. So you can be running or in the car or somewhere else and want to hear what's going on Twitter without actually reading it. It does some smart expansion. It'll take a link and try to find the title of the page that's being linked to and say the name of the title. If it sees an @name reference, and it will try to expand that out into the full name. So it tries to become fairly personable and interpret what these short Twitter messages are and expand them out so that they sound like a human being would say them, and then it reads them with a computer voice. But it's a pretty cool idea. It's brand new. There's still some bugs in it. It's trying really hard. I mean, speech synthesis on an iPhone app is tricky, but I think it's a great idea, especially if you're in the car or somewhere else where you want to see what's going on.
You have to stay connected.
Yeah, exactly. Then it'll read it to you. It's like having a book on tape, except it's Twitter. So $3, App Cubby, Tweet Speaker, yeah.
I think we have a title. It's like a book on tape, but with Twitter. Anyway, so Tweet Speaker. That sounds good. It's one of those things like you'd have to decide who you're going to listen to or what list you're going to listen to. I'm quite frightened.
No Kardashians allowed.
You could never do the people that I follow.
Get a good sports list while a baseball game is on. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know. It's a cool idea. It's such a cool idea.
That would be very cool to be able to grab that. So my pick of the week. I have one little one for the iPhone, and then another one a piece of hardware. One thing I started doing, and I started testing this because I just didn't trust it, and it's turned out to be really useful, which is the United.com, and I don't know if we have an overhead here, but
we do.
So the United.com application, which is you can book flights, check in, but most importantly, you can have a mobile boarding pass. And I don't think it's going to show mine. I already used it, so it doesn't show it. But a mobile boarding pass. Now, what that does is it's got a QR code that you can keep in here. So if you actually have one, I just used this last week, and you can have your boarding pass. So you don't have to print anything out, and it feels very weird. And it's just I still printed it out. And so what was funny was I went to the airport. I still printed out my boarding pass, and I put it in my jacket just in case someone asked for it, because I was like, I'm not going to get stuck somewhere without it. But essentially, and you can do this through their web page as well, but the app holds it a little bit more effectively. But basically, what you end up with is a QR code that you can get through security. You can get through. You don't need to. Yeah, you can get through security. You can get to the gate, and when you get to the gate, they just have you just put your phone over the, over their little reader on the way in, and you can see all the little geeks, going by. And I thought that I was, really on the cutting edge, but it was like half of the people that were getting on with me all had it on their phone. But I was terrified to do it the first time. But I got to say, it's very exciting because I am constantly losing. I don't lose my phone as often as I lose paper. So I wouldn't say that I never lose my phone, but I don't lose it as often as I'm losing paper. The only thing that got me nervous was my phone did start. I got down to 10% before I got on the gate, and I was like, if my phone dies, I'm not going to be able to get on the plane. So that was the.
It's like a scene from an updated version of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles where Steve Martin is all booked. He's okay to go, but then Del Griffin is talking to him on the phone for 40 minutes.
I didn't really think about it. I was sitting there like waiting to get on, and then I was like playing Angry Birds. And suddenly I realized that my phone was dying, and I was like, I could be in a lot of trouble here. So
I love these apps, but I have like 3 different versions of these for all the different carriers on my phone. But every time I leave for a trip, I still print out like the boarding pass, and I think to myself, you have an app that works, but you still have to print it out. Andy, this is something your dad would have done.
Yeah. And I have to admit that I've just started doing it. And I'm probably going to print them out for the next 3 months, and then slowly move over. So anyway, it's really a great thing. Now the hardware piece that I wanted to show, I didn't expect to spend so much time talking about it. A lot of people ask us how we back stuff up. And I thought I'd show this. There's a couple different developers. This is the one we have. This is by Newer, and this is Voyager. And I don't know if you guys have seen this.
I love it.
This is a raw. You basically put a raw hard drive in here. I should have brought a hard drive. I just brought the piece here, but you basically drop an internal hard drive into here, and you can get cases. Webatech makes actually reasonably good cases. Another company that makes some more padded cases that you can hold them like cassette decks, and what you can like little cassettes. And so there's your little eject. You can eject it out here. You can put the power in here. The great thing about this one specifically is that you can plug it into anything. There's a lot of versions of this. Having 2 Firewire 800 connectors is important because it means you can put it as part of a chain. You've got eSATA, you've got Firewire 400, you even got USB. So there's just, you can get those internal drives plugged into anything. The reason why would you want to do this was a lot of us are using storage. We're just kind of backing stuff up. And then we just want to put something on a drive, and we actually transfer stuff to each other with these internal drives, put them in a cassette deck, wrap them up, and send them. And now we're not paying for the extra case. We're not paying for those things. If we use them as a backup, we always back it up to 2 drives, not one of them. But we do it fairly often, and I think almost every computer we have has one of these connected to it. So, so as I said, it's the Voyager Q, I think, and it's by Newer, and definitely worth checking out. I think it's about $100 or $150, something like that.
It can be a lifesaver too, because it's great to know that if you're having problems getting a machine to boot up and getting the data off of it, that the nuclear option is okay. I'm just going to crack this open, take out the mechanism, and then just put it inside my toaster, and I'll at least be able to mount that hard drive and get the data off of it. Exactly. So it's awesome. Really the little toaster is works. And I don't think you mentioned it works with desktop hard drives, but also like the little notebook hard drives too.
Yep. Oh, it does. It's got the little slot in there. I've never actually used it with a smaller one, but anyway. So those are our picks for the week. Andy, where can people find you?
You can find me at Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I'm Ihnatko. On Google Plus, I'm also Ihnatko. On the web, I'm Ihnatko.com. I'm pretty much Ihnatko wherever you go. But if you can't spell Ihnatko, go to CWOB.com and you'll find links to all that sort of stuff.
Jason, where can people find you?
Find me at macworld.com. On Twitter, I'm Snell. And you could listen to my geeky podcast at theincomparable.com.
And Adam, where can people find you?
Tidbits.com and TakeControlBooks.com, and on Twitter people can find me at Adam Engst, and luckily having like Andy, a relatively unusual name, I'm pretty much Adam Engst everywhere.
Very good.
Or you can find him in his office at the very, very top of the Washington Monument. Pricey real estate, but what a hell of a view.
Leo, of course, will be back next week. This is Alex Lindsay sitting in, and until next week, break time is over. Get back to work.